Chapter 81. Freshman Class Assignment Test 5. Clevius. It might be our fate to live in the gutter for the rest of our lives. It would be unfair to say we are wrong for being born like this, but it may be wiser not to struggle in vain. Even if it was not my intention, the blood on my hands will not disappear. As your father, I am filled with despair. I want to tell you that one day you will have a bright future and that the trials of now are merely temporary, that everything can be overcome with hope. But comforting you with such honeyed words would only be escaping from reality. So, I have no choice but to confront you with reality. The likelihood of a grim and gloomy life is substantial. More often than not, the efforts won't be rewarded. You'll likely spend your time longing for a ray of sunlight in an underground devoid of daylight. But Clevius, I believe that even a life without light has its value. Even a life that seems like an endless cave can have meaning. I'm not saying this to make you feel better. I'm certain the time will come when you'll understand. Living this life, you might resent the blood you were born with. You will meet many who live radiant and glorious lives, lives that make yours seem like a gutter in comparison. It's only natural to feel deprived. Face that unfair and sad feeling head on. Forget the sentimental thoughts of why you must live and what meaning there can be in such a life. Once you live like that, meaning will find its way to you. I'm sorry I don't have more to tell you. Still, I have no doubt that something of value will find its way into your life. Asterisk. I've lost. Well done. As I shattered the student's mana stone, I waved off a nameless junior who had come seeking victory. Then, I sat back down at the altar to rest. My body was aching, and the ordeal was far from trivial. That makes it the fourth one. The test for class assignment is nearing its end, but fewer students have made it here than I'd expected. The toughest opponent was Joseph, who arrived first. And rightly so. His quick and easy passing through the illusion trials meant he was capable. Those who struggled to make it here generally have skills that are somewhat lacking. But for a freshman, that level alone is quite impressive. Students who came after Joseph were mostly stopped by Anise and Clevius. It's a harsh task to face a nearly third-year honors student in magic and a second-year combat leader while exhausted. Most have been weeded out by those two, and the few who did manage to get here either used escape magic to slip past or stealth magic to sneak in unnoticed. They were students who opted for tricks over a frontal assault. That kind of flexible thinking is commendable, but once they reached the altar, they were all stopped by me. Sigh. Among the new students, apart from Wade, the son of the Northern Border Legion commander, the overall level is quite average. And Wade is in the combat department, not magic. Of course, there are prodigies like Joseph and Agui, who stand out among their peers in the average grade level. However, compared to the so-called protagonist generation, the current second-year students, the talent pool is significantly narrower. The protagonist generation was extraordinary, not that the new students are lacking. It turned out to be a rather simple test. As the test neared completion, I sat quietly at the altar, sighing deeply. The freshman class assignment test is not part of the main storyline of Sylvania's failed swordsman. For the protagonist generation, it's merely an event they've heard about in passing. Therefore, I couldn't wholly predict how the freshman class assignment test would unfold from my standpoint. It's difficult to know every detail. That left one lingering question. The disoriented assistant professor Claire having failed to adjust the difficulty level, resulting in no students qualifying for Class A. Yet, among the new students, there must have been one with the strength to breeze through the test regardless of the difficulty. Even Wade, who was poised to claim the position of top freshman, couldn't be assured victory against such an opponent. With the capacity to subdue whatever emerged from the purple illusion discs, for that person to not have made it into Class A is indeed an odd situation. They probably didn't want to stand out. That is likely close to the truth. I sat quietly on the altar, catching my breath while looking up at the open sky. I had prepared extensively, but in the end, there was no need to use it all. Hoping the test would continue smoothly, I quietly stayed in my place. The first memory Clarice had as a saint was when she was baptizing the Vitus Frontier Earl of the Clarel Empire. The sight of the changing earl, who bowed his head as if it were the most honorable moment in the world when a petite girl with holy water on her hands made the sign of the cross and placed a red silk cloth symbolizing divine service on his shoulder, imprinted on the girl's mind. Next came the Count of Sela, who guarded the manor by Sail Lake. Then, it was the head of Rothtailor's house, Duke Creben. Clarice, appeared grown even for the title of a young girl, clearly remembered Duke Creben, who knelt before her to express his reverence. Since the man had been the only one among the noble families not baptized by the Telos Church, Clarice worried he might be hostile. Some were suspicious of his sudden support for the church. But to Clarice's surprise, the Duke embodied the ideal ruler at the baptismal ceremony. Kind, dignified, wise, a man who understood the masses. Not only Duke Creben but also his accompanying family and servants exuded grace, and Clarice immediately grasped that this was what true nobility looked like. Among them was the heir, Arwen Rothtailor, sitting gracefully in the guest seat, always showing a serene and beautiful smile. It was inevitable to think that this was what the dignity of a lady meant. The Rothtailor house, the empire's finest, upheld all things with grace. Such were new experiences for the young Clarice. Members of the Rothtailor family were all dignified and profound. Surely, such an environment would shape any person to handle any ordeal with wisdom. Before Clarice realized it, a bias of sorts solidified in her perception. Ah, huff, huff. Tanya struggled to catch her breath and straighten up on the ground. The illusion disc, trap that stretched from the middle of the mountain, even approaching it could make you instantly lose consciousness, falling into a trap of magical apparatus and forced to fight foes within illusions. Since it was only a test, no physical harm came, but still, for a freshman with no real combat experience, facing various monsters or wild beasts, although mere illusions, was mentally grueling. Tanya was no exception. Oh, huff. Leaning on a nearby tree, Tanya wiped the cold sweat off her body. She could have been gutted by a goblin's blade if she hadn't swiftly cast Wind Blade to subdue the goblin. A breeze through the belly would have been inevitable, though she wouldn't have felt pain or taken actual damage, but her legs were still trembling. As she neared the summit, various illusions assailed Tanya's mind. It wasn't just once or twice but numerous encounters. There were times her fingernails embedded into her flesh or when she was caught off guard by bladed attacks. Each time, it felt as though vitality was being siphoned from her. Just climbing the slope was becoming a tough task, and her mental state was strained. Look at this, please. A pine cone. It's so magical that a tiny thing like this, when planted, can grow into such a huge tree. Wow, look at these leaves, each one is a subtly different color. Is it because of the varying amounts of sunlight they receive? Is this mushroom edible, I wonder, But the companion, unaware or uncaring of Tanya's state, excitedly roamed around, as if on a field trip. With all these illusionary magics lurking around, one would wonder how the girl could be so cheerful. Especially since she seemed unaffected by the magical trappings, as per Tanya's observation. Tanya watched Kylie with curiosity, but saw no signs that she had cast any protective magic. I guess I just have a unique constitution. A unique constitution. Kylie, noticing Tanya's bewildered look, flashed a beaming smile and fumbled with her words. It's complicated to explain and, besides, the test is almost over, isn't it? Look there, we've hardly got any climb left. We should finish the test first. With weary eyes, Tanya gazed at Kylie. All the way to the mountaintop, Kylie had been bouncing around gleefully, taking in the surroundings like a child on an outing. Though she claimed to be there to assist in the test, perhaps her real desire was simply to wander the mountain. Tanya, you're amazing. Truth is, with this level of difficulty, it's surprising you didn't give up already, like many others have. Hardly anyone is left, you know. Well, I really want to get into Class A. Tanya brushed off her dress, stood up, and opened her chest with determination. If I lack the proper skills, I can't help it, but I have to try everything I can. Giving up is the most shameful thing. Is that so? Even if you don't make it to Class A, Tanya, you are already so lovely and noble. Kind-hearted, and you even have some magical prowess. Oh, you know how to flatter, don't you? While I appreciate the compliment, that's not enough for me. Tanya took a deep breath and boldly proclaimed, "The moment you lose the will to improve is the moment you completely stagnate as a person." That's true. Kylie, you come from the frontiers, so you might not understand this, but high status and authority come with their own responsibilities and burdens. Kylie's eyes sparkled as she clenched her hands and nodded vigorously. A sense of satisfaction swelled within Tanya. After all, an antagonistic noble lady often has her followers. They don't do much of substance but echo the noble lady's voice, forming a semblance of a faction. Tanya didn't consider such transparent hypocrisy the right way to act. But regardless of right or wrong, it felt good. The adoring eyes that lift and praise you as someone great, it's unexpectedly not so bad. Indeed. You were absolutely right. The urge for affirmation was particularly fatal for Tanya, who craved recognition. Kylie Ekner had an especially lively response. Strong reactions come from sincerity. This girl named Kylie truly empathized with Tanya's long-winded speech about the weight of high status and responsibility. Empathy. Tanya sensed a dissonance for a moment, but more pressing was the immediate challenge of the test before her. After all, having a diligent attitude in everything is really important. Seeing you, Tanya, makes me feel more motivated. That's right. Always make an effort in everything, and live a fulfilling life, then authority will naturally follow. Truly, people from the Rothtaylor family are so reliable and thoughtful. As Kylie clenched her fists tightly, nodding enthusiastically at Tanya's words, Tanya felt a surge of pride for the grand standing of the Rothtaylor family. Suddenly, you never even saw me as human, did you? So what are you going to do about it? What can you? Are you going to kill me? Now Arwen's gone, and if you kill me, the successor title is yours. Go on, try it. Here, take this ceremonial dagger. Stab it into my chest. Here, I'll give it to you, take it in your hand. Not everyone is like that. What? Tanya was still in a state of confusion. The image of Ed she had seen at the camp might have seemed reformed, but she couldn't quite trust that his change of heart was genuine. The terror that still clung to a corner of her heart was Ed Rothtaylor, the worst of rakes. It seemed impossible for such a man to so easily mend his ways. That deep-seated belief did not fade easily. Not everyone is like that. Even the most prestigious families can produce rubbish, and unbelievable rascals, over time. Who are you talking about? At Tanya's suddenly lowered tone, Kylie stopped mid-sentence. The atmosphere turned gloomy, perhaps because Kylie thought it was her fault, and clumsily, she changed the topic of conversation once again. Anyway, if that's what Tanya thinks, I will help Tanya however I can. Let's enter Class A with heads held high. With clenched fists pumping in the air, Kylie quickly tried to lift the spirits of Tanya, her first friend of the same age, worried about upsetting her. But, thanks for cheering me on, but, what exactly will you help with? Well, I actually have a special skill. You'd be surprised if you saw it. Though, oftentimes, I can't control it. Kylie, beaming with a bright smile, made one wonder what could possibly make her so excited. Tanya could only heave a fleeting sigh. But why did Zix choose to come specifically to the Department of Magic? Even if I belong to it, it feels like such a waste of your other talents. The barony of Islin, situated next to the grasslands of the Northern Kingdom, is a land of archaeology that has produced many scholars. Thus, despite being a relatively small domain, it still holds its own status among the nobility. Elka Islin, a longtime acquaintance of Zix, now essentially his life partner, looked out the window of the swaying carriage. He had come quite far from the continent's southwestern island of Akan. The thought of seeing his family and vassals after a long time at his family home brought him joy. Opposite the young lady sat, Lance of the Flora, Zix, quietly nibbling on snacks. He tilted his head curiously, looking towards Elka. They had been exchanging idle chatter during the long journey, but the topic that had just come up was unexpectedly abrupt. Zix was versatile in all fields, a true polymath. Single-handed swords, great swords, spears, javelins, knuckles, bows, bludgeons, he knew them all, and his knowledge of mid-ranking magic was nearing mastery. His alchemical knowledge was also outstanding. He had deeper insights than many students of the Department of Alchemy. Further, most of his knowledge was practical in nature, because he found purely academic knowledge hardly meaningful. No matter the task, he produced top-tier results, a complete person incarnate. Why so sudden? If you had gone to the Department of Combat or Alchemy, you could have been the top student there. I feel bad as if you gave up many benefits because of me. However, in the Department of Magic, a legendary monster stubbornly occupied the top seat. The enormous wall that is Lucy Mayrill isn't someone you could challenge simply because of outstanding skills or proficiency in knowledge. Although she seems idle like a corpse idling around the academy due to her lazy disposition, if she sets her mind to it, she could become a student with the best grades ever. Beyond just the top of the grade. Zix looked at Elka, who was giving him a worried look, and smiled wryly. I don't put value in such things. It's okay, Elka, don't mind it too much. And with that, Zix added. And I wouldn't have been able to be the top student even if I was in the Department of Combat. With a deep breath, the hand holding the sword started shaking. Clevius knew it himself, no matter if he held the sword again, he would never be able to go wild as before. The beastly nature that he had castrated would never come back, no matter what. Instead, the horror from slashing through people left a lasting mark on his heart, causing nausea. Clevius was guarding the altar's southern entrance. Not a single freshman had managed to break through the south entrance of the altar. This, arg. The 20th freshman lost to Clevius's swordplay, thrown out by the sheer force of the sword alone. The new student pinned to a nearby tree shook violently in terror, clearly offended by the overwhelming power difference. But Clevius was shaking just as much. Just, if you're going to try, please, don't. Sweat dripping like rain, Clevius relaxed his grip on the sword. It had been a while since he had fought like this. Wielding the sword brought up unpleasant memories. He had lost his senses then, but the memories remained intact. The sensation of cutting through flesh still lingered at his fingertips. The sword rolled on the ground, its hilt kicking his toes. Clevius collapsed, his legs giving out. Huff, ha, ha, really, what's happening to me, Ed Rothtailor? That damn guy. It was Ed who had come up with this idea. Swept up by the atmosphere and without refusing, Clevius had to find someone to blame nonetheless. Suddenly, Clevius felt a surge of rage over his own miserable condition. A gloomy and bleak person by nature. Unable to overcome the blood he was born with, nor the trauma that followed, always complaining and leaving no room for likability, such a person. Shabby and dull, just looking at him would make one depressed. A premature baby, a murderer, sword demon, disgrace to the family, defective, mutant. Only when he had become numb to all the insults that always followed him did he finally escape to Sylvania. But even here, he was treated the same. If he had to live such a miserable life until the day he died, what was the point? Oh my, there's still a trial left. Just when he thought everything had wrapped up, there were still guests left. The placement of arcane magic supplies at the altar was nearing completion. Standing at the entrance to the altar, far across from Clevius, stood two girls. One was a girl with neatly combed, fiery golden hair. The other one had brown hair that reached down to her waist, giving off a somewhat cozy appearance. One of them was unknown, but the other one was recognized. She was the Miss spoken of from the Rothtailor family, newly admitted. Yeah, Huff, I might be a bit tired but Clevius Nordendale lived a life in the shadows. He will probably spend his life wallowing in filth. What about Tanya Rothtailor? Showered with favor from a prestigious family, she would lead a brilliant life. If you simulate the kind of life you'd led until the day you die, the contrast is enough to make one surge with anger again. Clevius picked up the sword again. Cursed blood, neglect from his family, either way, life so far had shown no promise. The words of his father, who irresponsibly assured the worth of such life, were no longer effective. I'm sorry, but I'm not in a good mood. He steadied his breath and rose to his feet. Grinding his teeth, the blade he drew was suffused with a ruddy aura. The cold air of winter created steam around his mouth, and the fierce glow in his bulging eyes turned towards Tanya and Kylie. Let's finish this quickly. Bang. Ah, was the holy magic too strong? Are you all right? Oh no, nothing's broken, right? I should have known better than to use something like holy magic that I'm not familiar with. Clevius was knocked to the ground by the unforeseen impact from behind. He didn't even understand what hit him as he was pinned to the nearby tree. Only the startled voice of the girl with brown hair could be heard. The world goes dark when the eyelids close. Just before losing consciousness, Clevius lamented internally. This life truly is dark and dull. A life without worth is this miserable. The light at the altar of Gallum began to fade. Even the sun in the sky was slowly hiding its tracks. 20 minutes before the end of the test, most students had been subdued or had given up. The general outcome of the exam had already been determined. Ed, sitting quietly at the altar, looked at what was probably the last couple of guests of the day. Tanya swallowed dryly. A familiar face. Once a subject of fear, another time of hatred, now an individual too complex to summarize in one word. Ed Rothtaylor sat at the altar in tatters, evidence of several fierce battles he must have fought. Sitting slowly in front of the glowing pillar on the altar, his breath steamed up and disappeared into the air. His opponent too seemed quite tired. Tanya realized that she was in a rather advantageous situation. So brother is, the last exam. I won't say much. Give me your mana stone. Peeling his backside from the altar, Ed stood up lightly and drew a dagger. In one hand, he held mana drawn from the mana stone. The mages of the Rothtaylor family are mostly distinguished in fire magic and wind magic. It was a family trait, and Tanya was no exception. However, Tanya's command of magic was at most basic level and her skills were immature. As a mage, she was simply average among the new students. Without her combat capabilities, she definitely couldn't qualify for Class A. All she could do was try her best. Brother, you mean, that man. From the Rothtaylor family. Standing by her side, Kylie looked back and forth between Ed and Tanya. Then, a mix of emotions played across her face as she noticed Tanya's frightened expression. The setting sun. The red sky. At the high altar, a figure with a dagger in one hand and mana in the other looked down. The expression wasn't visible due to the backlight from the sun, but the cold gleam of his eyes through his hair alerted them that he was watching. Not all of them are like that. Even in prestigious families, rubbish people emerge over time, and so do outrageous brats. It was then that Kylie realized. This man was the rubbish brat Tanya had mentioned. Not knowing what Tanya endured from this man, but seeing Tanya, who was always confident and dignified, panic so, she simply couldn't imagine him as a good person. Kylie braced herself and looked at Ed. His neatly rounded golden hair was singed and disheveled after consecutive battles. The sleeves rolled up on his shirt were full of burn marks, and his trousers were covered in dust from rolling on the ground. The dagger he drew was a decorative one, but it had been used for so long it bore signs of daily life, albeit the blade was meticulously sharpened. Kylie had a peculiar fantasy about noblemen, especially those from esteemed families like the Rothtaylor. Impeccable appearance with accessories adorned here and there, a warm, accommodating smile, and elegance in every gesture. If she imagined the prince on a white horse she might encounter someday while roaming the world, certainly, he would be that noble and elegant man. A romanticism that any girl of that age might entertain once. Even more so for Kylie, with her exceedingly limited experience with men. However, the appearance of someone who seemed the exact opposite of her ideal man, Kylie was frankly terrified. Strictly speaking, it was someone quite the opposite of her ideal man. Tanya. Finally, the boy uttered her name. Both Tanya and Kylie stiffened for different reasons, bracing for the boy's inevitable declaration of battle. I'm sorry, but can you just go back? A response that defied expectations. The boy was already too battered to want to fight further. He was utterly exhausted. Still, if you're coming, then come. He sat down again at the altar, gathering his mana above it. The test was nearing an end anyway. There was no need to conserve mana stones any longer. Ed invested all the remaining mana stones from the altar into his spirit summoning, Hunhyun Shion Shion. A monument bigger than a house's beam. At its top, sat a wind wolf wrapping its tail around the monument, opening its wide maw. Whoosh! Ah! An unbearable gale blew. Even the summoned high-ranking wind spirit could cause people to fly with just the gale blown during its manifestation. Tanya and Kylie grasped nearby stone structures to withstand the fierce wind with difficulty. As the wind gradually subsided, they could finally look up at the top of the monument. The creature was as big as a house. Its majesty was akin to the storm itself. Behind Ed, who sat at the altar, the giant wolf looked down at the girls through gaps in the storm, its maw dripping saliva, and its eyes glowing with blue spirit energy, full of uncontained mana. It was a sight beyond conceivable reality. The pinnacle of incompetence now summoning what? With clenched teeth, Tanya looked at Kylie. As she looked at Kylie to ask if she was all right. "I'm just going to leave," declared Kylie, trembling and tearing up while still holding onto the column. "But weren't you going to help until the end?" Tanya couldn't bring herself to press on. Chapter 82. Through the legs of a giant wolf letting out a resentful howl, I can see, far in the distance, a boy sitting on an altar with his head bowed in defeat. He looks utterly exhausted, like he doesn't wish to move anymore. Isn't this the perfect time to strike him properly, I wonder? As Tanya nods in agreement, Kylie charges towards the wolf without hesitation, without even a word. Tanya is impressed by what seems like courage, but she quickly shelves that thought when she hears the scream. The sight of Kylie, screaming half in tears and rushing forwards, is the very picture of fear. Even if one believes they won't get hurt, hurling oneself into the embrace of such a massive wolf seems like a suicidal act. Moreover, the assurance was, unless some special exception applies, not that one absolutely won't get hurt. If there's even the slightest possibility, the fear still lingers. Nonetheless, Tanya had to admit, the sheer willpower Kylie showed in rushing forth demanded respect. She quickly dashed in the opposite direction. She couldn't predict how big a gap Kylie might create for her, but for now, she had to seize the opportunity presented. The wind wolf is startled for a moment. After all, it was just an exam for class placement for new students. There's a big chance that there was no real intention to hurt or kill the opponent. So what should it do with a girl who charges in as though it's a suicide run? Using those massive paws to press down and crush her would cause serious backlash. But it can't just stand there, even at the risk of causing some injury. Merelda swings its front paw lightly. However, the one who ends up wounded is Merelda. Boom! A cloud of smoke billows, but Merelda's front paw couldn't even scratch Kylie. Kylie's adorable but reckless charge leaves a deep wound on Merelda. Cuts, as if stained with claws, appear on its belly and flanks. Distinct traces of blood are visible on the ground. Roar! Merelda, confused by the unexpected attack, releases a shrieking cry. The roar momentarily shakes the air, a sound of panic. But the frail Kylie is thrown back by the shock alone. Her pale and slim limbs are not optimized for battle, just rolling on the ground a few times has drained her of all strength, rendering her useless. Clang! In the meantime, the sound of something falling from Kylie's body is heard. Somehow, relying on just the protection around her, she succeeds in pinning down Merelda's movements for a moment. This brief window was all the time Tanya had to struggle one last time. She was already charging towards Ed. The range of Tanya's basic magic is extremely short. But, considering that the already battle-worn and magic-drained Ed, from summoning high spirits, is now before her, even a single blow would be fatal. The sight of the boy on the altar, completely drained and sitting down, was getting closer. Kylie overcame her terror to create this brief window of opportunity. Tanya couldn't afford to waste it. The basic wind magic, dispersion. It's one of the few spells Tanya has mastered properly. It creates a strong wind centered on the caster, disrupting the movement of enemies nearby, and if powerful enough, can knock them flying. She pushes Ed away from the altar and swiftly offers up the magic stone. This was the last gambit. As Tanya, panting heavily, reaches the altar, Ed's figure comes fully into view. Tanya clenches her teeth and shouts, "You thought I'd give up?" There was always a sense of rebellion in her. The defiance in her voice was tinged with chills. The surge of magical wind becomes her final spear. It shatters the overwhelming disparity of power, Tanya's last stand. Ed looks down at her coldly, with no trace of panic in his eyes. What's truly terrifying is that gaze. Such an unshaken gaze, as if nothing is wrong. But it's too late now for Tanya to be intimidated by that look. The dice have already been cast. The surrounding wind magic hits Ed, and with him not even flinching, he falls from the altar and disappears. Gasp, gasp. Ed, who has now completely disappeared, was a sign that magic had taken effect. Tanya felt a moment of elation rising in her chest. But the fact that he disappeared made Tanya feel an eerie discomfort. Wish. Arrows. However, their forms are blurred. Several magic-formed arrows hit the ground and disappeared without a trace. Ah, help. Startled, Tanya stumbles backward and falls to the ground. And it's then that she notices scattered around the altar floor, illusion discs, magic engineering supplies. It would be challenging to create such advanced tools with basic magic engineering knowledge, but it was possible to modify burner versions to manifest at least a mild illusion. Although not as potent as the illusions that the purple discs could conjure, they could still undermine the reality to a degree. Especially considering Ed's current battered state, this level of illusion wasn't too difficult to implement. Tanya, with little knowledge of the magic engineering involved, couldn't even guess whether Ed had such knowledge. The only thing she could surmise was that probably many students had fallen victim to this tactic. So where is the real Ed? Tanya's eyes moved in the direction from which the arrows had come, towards trees unnaturally draped around the direction of the altar. Among them, a boy jumps down from one. Ed lands with difficulty and gets up, brushing himself off. He looked more severely beaten than the illusion had suggested. It was surprising he could still move. In one hand, he holds a makeshift bow. The ends of a branch suitable to serve as an arrow shaft were tightly strung by a bluish magical thread. Does that even work? How much magic sensitivity training has he done? Or, he knows how to use a bow. The same person who couldn't even properly hold a sword's grip. Tanya tries to get herself up, desperation filling her as her legs refuse to do their job. She attempts to stand up, but fear has already pushed her limits to the edge. Thud thud, Ed walks closer, though Tanya's legs have completely given up. Roar. Suddenly, that giant wind wolf has returned to Ed's side after overcoming Kylie. Looking up from her seated vantage point, the image is complete with the wolf's shadow, signaling that Tanya no longer has any chance of victory. Eek, eek. Ed, now right in front of Tanya, gazes down at her. His battered body is covered with bruises and scrapes all over. Flecks of blood are even visible. He's covered in dust, utterly exhausted, yet still showing no sign of struggle. The cold gaze downward reignites Tanya's trauma. The villain of the Rothtaylor family's appalling deeds, the dagger handed to them, the screams of the pained servants, and their terror-filled eyes. Memories flicker past Tanya's mind as if on a reel. A chill as cold as the gaze travels down Tanya's spine, she shakes uncontrollably. And as Ed extends his hand, Tanya closes her eyes tightly. I'm sorry, you must have tried in your way. We have our reasons on this side too. Whoosh. As a gust of wind blows, the next moment, the giant wolf's figure has disappeared. In Ed's hand is the magic stone Tanya had brought. Her body trembling, Tanya opens her eyes to see Ed smashing the stone, marking her failure in the exam. Even if you're kin, I can't just let it slide. If that were the case, knowing your temperament, you would have been even more furious. Right. What? But then again, I've seen you now, Tanya. You do have that side. Ed releases the magic of the makeshift bow, the magical thread snaps, and the branch reverts to being just a stick, which he casually tosses aside. Ed sighs and looks up at the high sky. The sun sets gently, the new student class allocation test is gradually coming to an end. The Tanya Rothtaylor that Ed knew was just a villain playing on her family's prestige, only to show off her arrogance in the student council elections and then exit the stage. He thought she would run away with her tail between her legs at the sight of a high spirit, but she surprisingly showed resilience. If I had been in that position, I would have run without looking back. But the fact that you, exhausted as you were, still tried to subdue me with tactics, that's really something. Not just anyone can do that. You can take pride in that. You're pretty amazing. Already collapsing from the situation, the moment Tanya realizes the ordeal is over, an incomprehensible wave of emotion starts to rise within her. Feeling awkward about the reaction he got, Ed hadn't foreseen this outcome. Regardless, the examination time was over. Tanya's magic stone was destroyed. With no desire to fight further, he contemplated some consoling words. Don't come any closer. A girl suddenly rushes between Tanya and Ed, her face covered in dirt as she bravely stands up to Ed. She stands with arms widespread, trembling, apparently having rushed over out of fear that Tanya might be harmed. Let me tell you, if you treat me as an enemy and attack, something bad will happen. I mean it. Don't move. She begs as if pleading to be believed, shaking so much it's hard to tell who is threatening whom. Ed, with no intention to harm, just sighs deeply. But his gaze drifts downwards, and in an instant, his pupils dilate. For the first time since the test began, Ed appears shaken, and he starts scanning the surroundings. Even though she's apprehensive of the change in Ed's demeanor, the girl doesn't let her trembling hands down, keeping focused on him. The exam is over. Ed, come here and help. Clevius totally knocked himself out. Professor Claire, can you update the score first? There's a mountain of stuff to take care of. The student council president elections are just at the start of next semester. Suddenly, from the altar entrance, Professor Claire's voice is heard. The voices of Anise and Yenica suggest that they are starting to tidy up after the examination. Ed tosses the last magic stone towards the altar. As magic swirls around him, a small flame bat rises above his head. What are you doing? The exam is over. What are you trying to do now? The girl's voice shakes as she calls out, but Ed pays no mind and sends the flame bat into the altar's clearing. There's no more reason to fight, is there? The faculty seems to be making their way up, so all that's left is to stand guard and protect Tanya until they arrive. The girl believes that, but then she feels a sudden change. Quickly glancing down at herself, she realizes what that sensation is. The tips of her chestnut hair begin to tarnish, as hints of silver swirl around. The illusion magic, given by the clerics of St. Tower is maintained by the crescent moon brooch, a semi-permanent magic engineering tool brought from Sylvania. It must be always carried to keep its effect ongoing. Clatter. The sound made when she was thrown back by Merelda, she now realizes what it was. It was the sound of the crescent moon brooch rolling on the ground, which she always kept close. The faculty are just about to burst in. The girl feels a creeping horror as her heartbeat intensifies and her breathing quickens. She swiftly turns her head towards the clearing. But the flame bat, sent off by Ed, had already fetched the brooch. The brooch in his grasp, Ed quickly stuffs it back into the girl's chest. Be careful not to lose your stuff, be careful. It was her first experience having such a large hand in her chest. Overwhelmed by the moment and the current experience, she takes a step back in shock. Breathing in and out at an uneven pace, merely looking at Ed makes her feel as if her head is filling with blood. The subtle light from the brooch again radiates, and the girl's hair, which had started to turn silver, regains its original color. The situation was so sudden that she couldn't muster a response. She just stood there, unable to react as the words got stuck in her throat. I'm coming now. My goodness, Ed. Why are you so hurt? As Ed gathers the elements and struggles to move towards the faculty with his injured body, the girl can only remain standing. Fortunately, Tanya seems too disoriented by the situation to grasp what just happened. The girl is just left standing there. Chapter 83. Come, Spring, 1. The sky viewed from Akan Island at early evening was always a mingled palette of colors, like paint not fully mixed. The sun gently retreated to the west, emanating a crimson aura that gradually faded as it reached the expansive heavens above. The blue-purple sky, not yet dark, was occasionally pierced by stars. This sight solidified the necessity of the term, early evening, as it was too late to be called the day yet too bright to welcome the night. As my breathing settled and my body leaned against the altar, I could feel my strength wane. The early evening sky had a calming force, steadily pressing upon the soul. It was the crossroads of day's end and night's inception, the world leisurely embracing the coming darkness. Do you know, I believe in a beauty that transcends eras and values, I pondered aloud. A clear testament to that is this very sky. Even the most treasured works of art can be subject to diverse interpretations and tastes, but who could gaze upon this sunset and not find it beautiful? That must be unchanging beauty. That's a complicated thought. It's not complicated, you're just too lazy to understand. Humans have such brief lives, yet they don't know how to be moved by every moment. A winged wolf, now smaller in size, lay atop the altar, sweeping its tail back and forth. With its reduced stature, it was more endearing than imposing. Even its voice was gentle, melding perfectly with the sunset scene and bringing forth an unbidden drowsiness. It made sense to feel sleepy. The day had been sufficiently draining. Ed looks exhausted, let's have him rest by the altar for now. The remaining cleanup is minimal anyway, just organizing magic engineering supplies and counting items, Assistant Professor Claire had suggested, before she disappeared with the other students up the slope over 30 minutes ago. From my perspective, it was a much appreciated consideration. As Claire had aptly noted, I was completely worn out. The absence of ups and downs and a dry life is the most terrible curse one can experience as a human, the wolf continued. One must learn to be moved by even the trivial things and find meaning in routine. Right. You're surprisingly sentimental. I've always preferred the sentimental. Haven't I mentioned that before? It was a chatty creature, as Yenica had previously pointed out, and it was clear why. If human lives are like the 4 seasons, a spirit's life is surely a long winter. A monotonous and desolate life eventually gives way to a sentimental disposition. A long life may seem more like a curse than a blessing, not just for spirits but humans as well. I'm at a loss for words when you put it that way. So, my point is, you need to start dating, you blockhead. Merylda, grooming its forepaw, let out a sigh through its nose. If you're totally clueless, I'll coach you. People like you are meticulous and faultless in everything but tend to be numb to their own selves. Collapsing from overwork and constantly getting injured are telltale signs. You're, just like what I heard about. Meddlesome. I've heard it so many times that pointing it out again is pointless. Anyway, Ed, you're incredibly dedicated. You'd match well with someone who is sincerely willing to look after you. A life partner, perhaps, you should look for such a person. Merylda, as if fixated on something, whispered insistently into my ear. Isn't this a splendid opportunity? Find someone who's genuinely kind, cheerful, preferably a friend, and adequately strong to lean on. Do you have any idea how emotionally helpful it can be to interact and grow with such a person? Do you have to sound so aggressive about it? If I release the summon now, who knows when you'd be able to summon me again? I must tell you everything while I can. And I'm not wrong, am I, Muck? You speak the truth, Merylda. Muck, who had a well-disciplined air about him, sharply straightened his back by my shoulder. Merylda was not bound by a contract with Yenica, they were merely close. This meant Muck wasn't in a direct hierarchy with Merylda, yet due to his deep camaraderie with Yenica, he seemed to be treated with respect akin to that given to Tarkhan in the spirit community. The world of spirits remained enigmatic to me. Lord Ed, heed Merylda's advice as always. It's treasured wisdom among us subordinate spirits, akin to a sacred text. Why not listen to Merylda's words as if taken with a grain of salt? Grain of salt. Have we finished talking, Muck? No, I apologize. This insolent Muck has misspoken again. To suggest taking it with a grain of salt, I'll atone with my. Before Muck could ramble on and proverbially bash his head in apology, I quietly touched his wing and reversed the summon. The mana from the magic stone seemed to be fully depleted. Extended discussions with Merylda were no longer sustainable. Merylda had transformed her massive body into something much smaller to maximize mana efficiency. Yet, even in such a form, a higher spirit like her voraciously devoured mana just by existing. I hadn't fully manifested her. Just resonating with her spirit form had drained a substantial amount of mana. This elemental was still beyond my control. Forcing a contract through mana overload came with inevitable penalties. Anyway, Ed, you must be tired too. 2 witnesses saw you summon me. Wouldn't the academy be in chaos if they informed the staff? If they push you up to Class A like Yenica, well, that's a different story. Really think it would get to that? The faculty aren't fools. If they hear rumors, they'll ask me to summon you again. Though, I doubt I have the mana left for that. Right, you lack conclusive evidence to prove our contract. Even if you could, not being able to properly wield it somewhat depreciates the value of being a spirit summoner. I'd rather not deal with being interrogated on how I contracted you. I'm not keen on revealing much about the ring. It didn't come from the cleanest of origins. So, how will you handle the testimonies? I'll claim it was an enhanced illusion created by a magic disc. No one was seriously hurt, and any wind you've raised can be attributed to my doing. As always, you are thoroughly prepared. Merylda sighed deeply and resumed grooming her paw. If Muck is a sniper rifle, then Merylda is a bazooka, no, a tank. Each shot's value and power differ, requiring long preparation and consuming substantial resources. Unlike Muck, which I can wield effortlessly, Merylda devours mana to its limit without fully exhibiting her potential. She is certainly not a spirit I can control at my level. To utilize Merylda effectively, as I had by using the mana stones provided by the Academy, external mana sources become essential. Yet these are incredibly inefficient compared to mana naturally formed within the body. Thankfully, I've dabbled in magic engineering. It's one of the deepest fields concerning mana efficiency and resonance. With proper magic engineering, I may develop a systematic alternative to manage Merylda's requirements, something more sophisticated than primitive methods like mana stones. By the way, Yenika seemed quite down. Do you know anything? Yenika's melancholic gaze into the fire came to mind. After all, to Merylda, Yenika was a dearest friend among friends. Oh, worrying, are we? Of course, I am. Oh my, hee. Merylda, trailing off with a mischievous smile, said. I wouldn't spill something Yenika refrained from sharing. However, some concern on your part wouldn't hurt. While you're at it, why not show a bit of care, attend to her, maybe even hang around and wait. You should work on breaking the habit of slipping into monologues mid-conversation. Sorry about that. Guess I've picked up some habits from Yenika. Merylda shook her tail a few times and then straightened up, gazing at the sky now smeared with red twilight. Yenika needs some internal growth too. The ways of the world are like that. Being naively kind doesn't mean the world will return the favor. Run was Merylda's playful tone, whisper as she continued staring skyward. I told you, a spirit's life is but a long winter, whereas human life resembles the diverse seasons. For Yenika, this is a long winter. Though she spoke as if it were nothing, I could clearly feel through her voice the concern and implicit trust she held for the evolving spirit summoner. Despite her verbal assurance, it was evident she worried. But the steadiness in her voice was more reassuring than unsettling. But remember, spring always comes. After all, seasons are cyclical. That's hopeful of you to say. Oh, I'm naturally optimistic. Pessimism doesn't help. So, should we wrap this up? I've guzzled enough of your mana as it is. Indeed, even when Merylda took the form of a small wolf, she still consumed an unbearable amount of mana. Just because you're smaller doesn't mean you're easier to handle. I happen to be on the costly side. You see, even this tiny form is uncomfortable for me. Among all the forms I can take, this is the most considerate for your mana efficiency. Really, you have other forms. Of course, but assuming my true form is most comfortable. And among those, the wolf form is superior. And so, Merylda's voice regained a playful note. What, you'd prefer a more beautiful girl form? I can do that, but I wouldn't recommend it. Your mana wouldn't sustain such a delicate form. Fine for eye candy, but impractical. Enough. No use talking about unnecessary things. I just didn't think there was such a big difference in mana efficiency between the large wolf form and this current one. Ah, you're unaware. Since you used mana stones to compensate, you couldn't detect the difference properly. Mana from such stones is naturally dull compared to that formed within the body. Gradually, the wolf form began to dissipate into the wind-like mist. The mana, forcibly stored within, escaped, and the resonance with the spirit weakened. It would likely not be until after the vacation that I'd be able to resonate again. A spirit like me doesn't contract with just one person. Did you really think you could handle all the mana alone? As she began to vanish, bidding a temporary farewell, Merylda added no further words. Finally alone atop the altar, the last of the sunset faded away. Shadows tilt and lengthen. Other than the occasional sound of the wind rustling the trees, complete silence envelops the area. Though I had told myself to rest, I forced my body up and looked towards the altar's steel. Mulling over Merelda's words, I sighed deeply at last. The steel stretched toward the vast sky. Gazing earnestly at its peak, I placed my foot on a protruding part next to the steel and I began to climb. What is it, Senior Yenica? Ah, no, I thought I saw someone on top of the altar just now. Maybe I saw it wrong. My sore body ascended with difficulty, stepping on the side projections of the steel and reaching the top. A solitary altar standing in the clearings of the Oran Mountain's peak. There hardly seems to be any place for someone to hide. It might be more suitable to say that they are simply not visible. Eventually, I reached the top of the steel, the highest point of the Oran Mountain. With no obstructions, the full view of Akan Island unfolds before my eyes. Standing straight against the fluttering wind, everything else fades and it seems as though I'm floating in the air. Quote. I sat down next to Lucy, who was watching the setting sun. I didn't pester with pointless questions like why are you here, how long have you been here, or what are you doing. Lucy is someone who wouldn't seem out of place no matter when or where. I did feel a sense of dissonance. No matter how abundant the mana stones may be, handling high spirits as naturally as flowing water should be impossible. The mana required for manifestation or communion came entirely from my own power, but during combat, the full strength of Merelda was drawn out by a different source of mana. If there was a power capable of intervening in the manifestation of Merelda's energy, it would surely belong to someone who made a contract with Merelda, and there could only be one suspect. I didn't expect you to help. I appreciate it. It felt wrong to ignore it. If Lucy had been sitting here from the start of the test, that meant she likely witnessed most of what transpired on Oran Mountain. It's a hypothetical situation. Even if I ultimately could not prevent the new students from overpowering me alone, I doubt Lucy would have sat idly by. Seemingly disinterested and detached from the world, there comes a moment when if Lucy decides to act, she invariably rolls up her sleeves. Whether it was Joseph, Agui, Tanya, or Kylie, whoever finally brought me down, would inevitably come face to face with Lucy, leaping from the steel. I could easily imagine that scenario. Lucy, rising from the altar after hitting the ground and kicking up a cloud of dust, adjusting her hat, would surely be an insurmountable wall. The test from the beginning was the epitome of unfairness. This doesn't seem like a good place for a nap. I didn't come here to nap. Then, I did think about going to take a nap at the cabin but I spent nearly the entire day unable to visit the cabin due to scholarly duties and camp maintenance, leaving me with no time for rest. I don't like an empty cabin. At her words, I cast my gaze downward. Sitting side by side, watching the darkening sky, Lucy's expression remained unchanged. Fluttering white hair and a skin like white jade absorbed the dwindling sunlight, their color muted more than usual. With sleeves fluttering about and a buoyant stride, I reached the campfire, but it was extinguished, the cabin inside empty. It felt the same as when I had woken from sleep, the eerie atmosphere of the camp lingering. The great mage Glast ended his life in a cabin in the Rameln Mountains, or so it said. I could easily imagine the scene after his departure, making it difficult to offer any response to Lucy. So I took a walk instead. Stopping at that, Lucy absently stared at the sky. Regrettably, this altar of alternation is where Lucy would stand up against the apostles of Telos in the third act. It's quite ironic. The death of the prophet Adele. Clarice, realizing the will of the god and the dark of the saintly, turns into the saintess of disbelief. Telos apostles descend to condemn Clarice. Lucy trying to protect Akan Island from the apostles following Glast's will. The main characters, unaware of the backstory, stand in Lucy's way following the archbishop's edict. Caught in a tangled web, even being branded a heretic by the church, she doesn't complain. Lucy standing aloof, overlooking all creation between the punitive force and the apostles, that's the highlight of this. Third act. Princess Phenia's royal guardians, Lortel's mercenary band, the cathedral knights of the church, the Lucy punitive force composed of the main characters, the high officials of the academy, and even Headmaster Obel Forcius himself being crushed to bits, leaving only Lucy to eliminate more than half of Telos' apostles in her battered state. Ultimately drained of her strength, she's subdued by Tylee, who has mastered the final sword ceremony. Only after all the backstories are revealed do people understand why Lucy tried to kill the god's apostles. Perhaps she's the tragic hero of the tale. It's late recognition that can be more painful than misunderstanding. That guy wasn't actually bad. I didn't understand why he did that crazy thing, but now I see. Who could have known he had such circumstances? Such reflections, suggesting that the truth was different after all, may well aid the immersion into the narrative. However, if you're the actual person caught in such a fate, could you really withhold any complaints? Who knows whether it's due to inborn nature or simply feeling it's pointless to speak up. Lucy ends up shouldering everything alone. And I have no intention of stopping her path. It's not about sacrificing Lucy for political reasons, cold-bloodedly. Simply put, this turn of events isn't necessarily just a bad ending for Lucy. Only after this third act ends will Lucy be able to set aside her heart's burdens, presumably meant to be carried to her grave, and live her own life. Without shedding those burdens, Lucy would forever be unable to escape the shadow of Glast's death. The Sylvania Academy is a treasure built through a lifetime of effort by my teacher, Sylvania Lobester, for the progression of scholarship. This precious treasure is riddled with trials that have already been observed. Of course, only visible to the eyes of the celestial scholar, Sylvania. It's said that the earth hardens after rain, so most trials will be overcome by Sylvania Academy itself, but there will come a trial once that cannot be done without your power. When that time comes, will you lend me your strength for this old man's sake? Lucy, a dying archmage. With just skin and bones left, he reaches out with difficulty to clasp Lucy's hand while speaking of the burden that must have remained heavily upon her. The sticky sentiment shed, I look again to the refreshing wide view of Akan Island. The scale of Sylvania Academy sprawls impressively. From the new semester, those who make use of that vast ground will start splitting by half. Once Fenia and Lortel divide the school's influence in two, it will ultimately be a recurring fight for power and politics. The Sylvania Academy's third act, the beginning of the power struggle part, is practically initiated at the start of the term with the Student Council President election. The main branching points that determine the course of the scenario will soon unfold. It's a long fight, but there will be gains as well. Thus, I spent a great while gazing down upon Akan Island. Thud. Whoosh. Suddenly, Lucy stood up, approached me to around my knees, and began pressing down on one knee, apparently to smooth it out. Once satisfied with the work done, she laid on her stomach, and as if it were nothing, she spoke up. I realized this recently. Absent-mindedly flailing her arms, she continued. I guess I get lonely. It wasn't quite natural for her to come up to the peak of Oran Mountain under the guise of a walk. Next time I plan to leave the cabin empty for long, maybe I should let her know. But since Lucy is everywhere at once, I don't really have anything to say. The last rays of the setting sun gradually fade as the sky starts to be overtaken by stars. The changing of day to night, the changing of seasons. Night falls, and spring comes. You've arrived earlier than expected. I couldn't wait to bolt out of that dingy place. Ah. As Bielmeyer made to take the luggage, Clara enthusiastically declined with a bright smile. Now that you're the head maid, I can't let you do this much. After all, you're not even assigned to me. Continuing on with her bags, Biel wore a slightly uncomfortable expression and sighed deeply. Despite originating from a well-known Viscount family, Clara refrains from flaunting her title. Just by her appearance, calling her noble would be a stretch. Clad in a simple flared skirt and a solid-colored blouse, her sharp-bobbed hair combed neatly, anyone would mistake her for an energetic village woman. If someone were asked to pick the noble between Anise and her, everyone would choose Anise without hesitation. Looks like I've managed through this break as well, phew. Hating her excessively authoritative family to the core, she prefers to cling to the academy as much as possible. But even so, she has to greet her family during the holidays, so she returns to her hometown periodically. And then, like roasting beans on lightning, she cuts her visit short and rushes back to school. Even returning so hastily during the break period speaks volumes. The nagging of those nobles would have nearly caked my ears. Ah, really, talking nonsense without understanding. Clara grumbled as she handed Biel a gift she'd brought from home, having apparently stopped by the rose garden first. When Beale unwrapped the package, it revealed a luxurious mug. Beale thanked her profusely. With a beam, Clara modestly downplayed the gift and once again looked towards the academy. Sigh, there's nothing like the air of your true home. The warm air of my dear hometown. Compared to my place brimming with clueless fools, Sylvania filled with dear friends I can share hearts with is the best. Jubilantly, she picked up her bag laden with gifts and bade Beale farewell. Anyway, Beale, I'm glad you're looking well. I have to go see my academy friends now. It's been a while, and I've brought plenty of snacks, so I've even got everything ready for a tea party with Anise and Yenica. I've written them both and they said they'd come. Just thinking about seeing them makes me thrilled. My chest pounds with all the stories we have to share. Maybe I'm still not quite grown up. Take care, Beale. Clara waved her hands cheerfully as she headed off. Watching Clara skip away with pure excitement, Beale failed to offer a proper farewell. She just stood there, holding Mug tight, sweating buckets. It was an unprecedented expression for Beale. Chapter 84, Spring's Call 2. The regular faculty meeting was a formal and significant occasion, distinguished from the usual, routine faculty meetings. While the number of attendees was not much different from the regular faculty meetings, the caliber of participants was a step higher. Whereas regular faculty meetings were gatherings where full professors, associate professors, and academic staff all came together to discuss practical matters, regular meetings were more focused on deciding macro-level operational directions. Above all, the most significant difference was that Headmaster Obel Forcius presided over these meetings himself. The meeting was a venue for checking on the progress of various academic departments, exchanging situations that needed review regarding student education and management, and making direct decisions on important matters. In reality, for veteran professors and management-level professors, these meetings were an opportunity to prove their competencies, so even the most experienced faculty members prepared thoroughly. The winter vacation was reaching its end. Right now, with no spare moment in preparation for the upcoming semester, through the regular meeting, it was crucial to confirm the direction and policy of academic education. As such, this meeting was reserved for those at least at the rank of mentor or emeritus professor. It was unnatural for anyone to see Assistant Professor Claire Elfin mixed in among the meeting attendees. The results of the recent class assignment tests are as follows. Dean McDowell was in the midst of presenting the overall test results to Headmaster Obel. Obel browsed through the class allocation results for each department and briefly tilted his head in confusion. This year's Magic department has no students in Class A. Who was in charge of the exams? Assistant Professor Claire, I.C. Claire, who had been trying to blend in inconspicuously, trembled and her shoulders shook when Obel called her by name. By rights, she was not supposed to be attending such a meeting, but she was there as a special representative for Professor Glast, and thus had no choice. She had intended to quietly shrink away amidst the meeting seats filled with emeritus professors, never expecting her name to be called. Was she not said to be a protégé of Professor Glast? My expectations are quite high. Thank you. I have no intention of meddling in the strict criteria used to select students, but I did not expect that not a single A-class student would be chosen. The emeritus professors were diligently scanning the distributed reports. Claire had not anticipated attracting so much attention. Glast, her predecessor, had notoriously strict standards for A-class students, and there had been years when no A-class students were chosen, so she thought it wouldn't really matter. From the standpoint of a principal, I feel the need to check the reasons behind this and consider them. Whether the level of incoming freshmen in the Magic department is purely that low, or if more stringent conditions were requested, I must be aware of such matters. That is, judging by the exam content, you had them compete against upperclassmen, correct? Attention was drawn. Headmaster Obel's eyes moved from side to side as he began to analyze Claire's hastily prepared exam report. Oh my, what? The top combat student of the second-year pre-nursery. The reactions of the emeritus professors, who were also reading the documents, varied. The exam content was subject to interpretation, depending on who was reading it. In particular, making students face off against Clevius Nortondale, the combat department's top student from the upcoming second year, was seen by many to be too harsh. Some of those upperclassmen appear to be fairly competent, perhaps the challenge given to the freshmen was too severe. Wiping away her increasing perspiration in secrecy, Claire spoke with as much confidence as she could muster. With a bright smile, she said, I judge them to be fit for Class A, if they could handle this much. It was a hasty response, but faltering here would do no good. Assistant Professor Claire maintained as bold a front as possible. Her bold demeanor prompted the emeritus professors to swallow dryly in response. Yenneca Faylover, Ed Rothtaylor, Anise Hylan, Clevius Nortondale. Reading through the list of Assistant Professor Claire's research lab members, Headmaster Obel soon closed his eyes and nodded. The perspiring emeritus professors deeply imprinted those names into their minds. People who knew. Even the professors who didn't believe in superstitions had to gradually acknowledge Claire's natural affinity for people. It was as if she had done something extraordinary in a past life. Some even considered her seemingly naive demeanor to be a facade. She was innately capable of selecting and managing people. Otherwise, it made no sense for all of the talents to flock to Assistant Professor Claire. She had the world's scholars as advisors, famous figures within her circle of friends, and her own mentees were nothing short of remarkable gems. It was to the point where one might ask why heavens favored Claire so much, and so the emeritus professors began to keep a close watch on any new faces around her. Anise, the top teaching assistant that all professors coveted, was a prime example. The other newly emerged names were, still difficult to judge. Just from the fact that Claire could sit in such a consequential meeting and assert her opinions with confidence, it was clear that she was not merely a naive individual. The cunning hidden behind her innocent appearance remains to be fully assessed. What exactly was she thinking inside? I want a tart. Rubbing her hungry stomach, Assistant Professor Claire sat there without a single word, just enduring the moment. Anyway, the first-year class assignments are now finalized, and the lists of top students are confirmed, so we're almost ready for the next semester, Obel commented after going through the report outlining details not only of the new students but also the entire student body's academic records. Ahead of the student council elections, what mattered most in the present scenario was the list of top students. Top combat student of the first year, Wade Callamore Magic Department top, Joseph Whitepelt's Alchemy Department top, Claude Belarus overall top, Wade Callamore. Top combat student of the second year, Clevius Nortondale Magic Department top, Lucy Mayrill Alchemy Department top, Elvira Eniston overall top, Lucy Mayrill. Top combat student of the third year, Drake Loggers Magic Department top, Yenneca Faylover Alchemy Department top, Adelante overall top, Yenneca Faylover. Top combat student of the fourth year, Tyke Elfelin Magic Department top, Triciana Bloomriver Alchemy Department top, Dorothy Whitepelts overall top, Tyke Elfelin. The top student of each department is decided by the different faculties, and the student leaders from all faculties among these top students were the class leaders. The success in the student council elections would largely depend on rallying the students from this top list. The role of student council president at Sylvania Academy was significant. Normally, it would be preposterous for a student representative to possess powers comparable to staff, but Sylvania Academy's student structure was unique, not just end-stage talents gathered there. Nobles and influential family, scions who wouldn't dare squeak a protest, even including royalty and saintesses, were enrolled as students. The student council president represents the voice of the student body. With the backing of numerous students, the student council president could essentially exercise the authority vested in those students. For a president supported by a triple-digit number of influential family scions, the academic body cannot afford to disregard their position. Predecessor President Veros was non-radical, tended to maintain the status quo amicably, and the Academy found it quite convenient during his 2-year tenure. With his departure due to graduation, it now becomes critical who the next student council president will be. Have we grasped the tendencies of each class leader? Obel initiated the discussion lightly. The Academy also needed to preemptively assess which student would be elected as the representative. The surest way is to observe the inclinations of each class leader, who holds considerable sway in the student council elections. Combat, magic, alchemy, the chief of each department often has the ability to shape public opinion within their year. Even without raising their voice, most students respect the class leader's opinion. There are exceptions, of course, but there is a definite tendency. In the case of the alchemy department, it's an accepted tradition to simply follow the class leader's opinion when uncertain. Furthermore, surpassing just class leaders, reaching the rank of class leader means they essentially hold sway over the fate of student council elections. Unless there's an unusual dissenting voice, generally, opinions revolve around the class leader. I shall report the specifics separately. Very good. Let's move to the next agenda. Relieved that the focus has shifted away from her, Assistant Professor Claire finally exhaled. After all, standing in for Professor Glast was not an easy task. The next item is, the snowstorm again this year. It was a regularly recurring item on the agenda around this time each year. Due to climate conditions, Akan Island faced a week-long snowstorm just before spring arrived every year. The timing varied slightly, but the snowstorm never failed to visit annually. Aligned with this period, it was necessary to restrict outdoor activities for students for a week and confine them to their dormitories, while also thoroughly checking the insulation and repair status of each dorm, and managing internal supplies. Ophelius Hall was already well prepared in terms of facilities and staffing. Paying more attention to the condition of Lortel House and Dex House, Obel felt the sting of time rushing by. Realizing this was the last cold spell before spring, time seemed to fly. Name: Ed Rothtaylor. Gender: male. Age: 18. Grade: 3. Race: human. Achievements: meticulous survivalist, 1 year. High elemental summoner. Physical strength 13, intelligence 13, dexterity 15, wisdom 12, luck 11. Combat ability detail, magic ability detail, living skills detail, alchemy skills detail, new creation, wooden windbreak. A well-maintained wooden panel bound several times over with rope and then buried at the junction in the ground. It served to block drafts, but wouldn't hold up against excessively strong winds. Crafting difficulty, 1.5. At this stage of proficiency, even items of this caliber no longer contributed toward crafting skill improvement. With a dexterity stat at 15, dramatic growth had plateauing almost to a halt. A dexterity level of 15 meant that most projectile or craft-related skills would not stagnate due to insufficient dexterity. To push toward dramatic growth, it seemed time to seek a different stimulus for improvement. Unlike Tylee, who could merely sit still while trials came crawling to him, it was time for me to pound the pavement in search of them. Sigh. I wiped my sweat and scrutinized the windbreak I had diligently installed. Most items that had been outside the camp had been moved inside the hut. The materials too cumbersome to be stored inside the hut were wrapped up with canvas and secured with several layers of rope, stored behind the windbreaker. Indeed, thorough preparation for strong winds seems prudent. Brushing off sweat and stretching my arms against the cabin wall, I heard a familiar voice from the fire. Turning to look, the situation was immediately clear. The intricately decorated maid uniform looked exceedingly tiresome at a glance. Impeccably dressed without a wrinkle, Belle carried Lucy in her arms. Swinging like dried fish on a drying rack, Lucy shuddered with fright, the maids of Ophelius Hall clearly not to her liking. "You look well, that's a relief. Young Master Ed, are you here for Lucy? Snowstorms are on the horizon. The Academy's policy has been communicated. During the snowstorm, outside dormitory access is forbidden unless necessary. Personnel management will be stricter than usual as well. Hence why she had come to capture Lucy in advance. While someone like Lucy is unfazed by storms or snowstorms, the rules are the rules. Getting dirty in such weather only pities the washing maids. As the one most likely to attempt escape, we must keep a strict watch. We plan to rotate watch staff for week-long shift duties. Help me. Quote. Belle's thoroughness was commendable, even if somewhat reluctantly. Despite her apparent disdain, as a head maid, her management skills were unparalleled. As rigid an environment as it may be for Lucy, the fact that she would be confined to Ophelius Hall for an entire week was not something I could alleviate. As mentioned, rules are rules. To urge her to escape would be irresponsible, considering how much Lucy owes to the kind maids. Being in a management position facing the snowstorm must be a new experience for you. Surely, you have many concerns. Would you continue with formal speech, please? To be honest, there's not much to worry about. Ophelius Hall has excellent facilities, and generally, there are not many students who wander outside during the snowstorm season. There shouldn't be too many issues. As long as we keep a close eye on Miss Lucy's escapades, there shouldn't be any unexpected variables. Bell shifted the topic towards me while adjusting his hold on Lucy. In fact, if there's any concern, it's more about Master Ed. Can you endure a blizzard lasting a week in such conditions? No offense, but with just these windbreaks, it seems it'll be quite challenging. Well, this setup is just to protect the supplies. Additionally, to prevent any adverse effects on the cabin, ropes were secured over the roof and tied tightly to the ground, and various traps were carefully stored inside the cabin. I have a separate place to take refuge during the blizzard, so there's no need to worry too much. With you saying that, I'll try to worry less. I plan to spend the blizzard week entirely focused on magical engineering research in the Soul Library. Being underground, it does feel a bit claustrophobic, and it's not a place I'd want to stay long-term, but it's necessary. All the required firewood has been moved there, and ventilation measures are in place, although it's just making fires near openings. It's unfortunate that I can't rely on Lucy's magic, but I should be able to manage for a week. I just hope the camp remains unharmed in my absence. After completing an extensive training period in the library, the weather should have become quite mild, and I'll have made significant progress in my magical engineering training. It feels odd, almost like hibernating through the winter. Speaking of which, Master Ed, there's another concern. Another concern. Bell looked troubled, stroking his chin, then shook his head vigorously. Maybe it's overstepping, but now I'm even more curious. Losing his resolve, Bell, holding Lucy more securely, spoke to me with a determined face. Anyway, best of luck, Master Ed. The blueberry pie tasted like it had sand in it. These were delicacies directly sourced from the most renowned bakery in Wangdao. Claire, excited to see her academic friends after a long time, brought these premium snacks. Sitting in front of her closest friends, Yenica and Anise, Claire sipped her tea, feeling like she was on pins and needles. In a student welfare facility at the professor's student union building, the three of them sat side by side on a bench, unable to engage in proper conversation for nearly 5 minutes. Claire initially tried to spark discussion with her excitement about vacation plans and next semester's classes, but only received short answers, with a tense atmosphere lingering between Yenica and Anise. Why are they like this? Did they fight? The obvious tension suggested a fight, giving Claire a headache. It was heartbreaking to think her two dearest friends from Sylvania had fought. She reminisced about seeing Yenica and Anise before leaving for vacation, always together, despite their bickering, which now triggered Claire's nostalgia. The bond between Yenica and Anise was strong. Even if they had fought, it likely wasn't over something that could sever their friendship. Anise, despite her tenacity, was inherently good-natured, and Yenica was beyond reproach. Any disagreement between them couldn't be too complex. It was time for Claire to mediate and help them reconcile. Ed hugged me, Yenica said emotionlessly. Claire managed to swallow her tea, which threatened to reflux. What do you mean? Claire looked directly at Anise. The implication of Yenica's words suggested something more, forcing Claire to digest the news while observing Anise's reaction. Anise, looking awkward and sweating, couldn't meet Yenica's eyes. Anise, it's more of a misunderstanding, yeah. Anise quickly looked up, explaining to Yenica while sweating profusely. The spirits oversimplified the story. They focused too much on the superficial facts. Spirits don't know the full story. What? Anise took a deep breath, regaining her composure. Anise Hylan, the meticulous and thorough chief teaching assistant of the academy, seemed to return to her usual self, reassuring Claire somewhat. I need to apologize to Yenica. There's something Claire also knew. Actually, I did flirt with that man, Ed. Claire finally understood the whole story. Before leaving for vacation, Anise had mentioned throwing herself at Ed to see his reaction. Ah, so that was it. Yenica found out. Anise, you're really. But yes, you should apologize. Yes, Yenica, I'm sorry. I just couldn't trust Ed Rothtaylor, he seemed too flippant, I wanted to test him. What? No, really. Yenika's pupils shook violently, understandable to Claire, whose heart also began to race. Chapter 85. Spring, Come Forth 3. My eyes had long adapted to the darkness, for my life had never known the light. When I reluctantly opened my drowsy eyes, the blood-drenched world I encountered gnawed at my heart. One image, in particular, was deeply etched into my mind, the moment I opened my eyes to find myself driving a knife into my brother's heart. He was the brother who stood by me even when the rest of the family turned their backs, the one I considered my sole ally. And yet, even he could not resist the cursed blood that drove my hand to betrayal. Coughing blood, with his eyes bloodshot, my brother looked down at me and spoke. With teeth grinding and blood vessels bulging in the heat of his voice, perhaps he was cursing me. The words he spoke as the blood trailed from his mouth were, "Why did you come all the way to the Academy's research office when all functions are to stop until the snowstorm ends? You don't have to come to work, you know." Startled, Clevius quickly gathered his senses. He had nearly lost himself again to the hallucinations that occasionally surged through his mind. The weather is erratic, and it's best to stay in the dormitory as much as possible, isn't it? But, despite that, Assistant Professor Claire, you're here at work. The youngest professors have their destinies, you see Tilda. We are fated to work until our very limits, Assistant Professor Claire hung her head and sighed deeply. The sky was gradually filling with lush clouds, and soft flurry of snow began to fall intermittently. It resembled a cozy winter scene now, but the snow and wind would intensify in mere moments. Akan Island was busy preparing for the storm, and the Laplace bakery had also entered a temporary closure. It was a regretful oversight not to have stocked up on snacks beforehand. About that thing you mentioned before, the academic assistant position. Clevius got straight to the point, foregoing any preliminaries. Becoming a full-time member of the research office, It's not a bad idea, Tilda. Since we've expanded our staff, everyone should be able to handle their duties more easily. That's not it. I think I'd rather not take part in it at all. Why all of a sudden? Did you receive a better offer from another research office? No, it's not that. Clevius hesitantly murmured in a quiet voice. The conditions are generous, but I'm not interested in taking on such responsible tasks. I came to tell you that. Why? You're quite diligent and capable of handling your assigned tasks, aren't you, Clevius? Well, that's because it's mandatory, and beyond that, I don't like taking on roles that demand more responsibility or capability. Clevius swallowed dryly and spoke with conviction. Whenever such duties were demanded of me, I've mostly lived through failures. Maybe I've finally gathered some wisdom from life. It's best to avoid starting certain things in the first place. It often turns out to be the right answer in the end. More often than not, I ended up being a burden to others. Stuttering, the haggard and gloomy appearance of Clevius was all too familiar. I thought maybe you were receiving better treatment elsewhere or had an offer from another place. It's not that. I'm not qualified for that, and the treatment here is really good, and I like it, but... Really? So, you could do it if you tried. You mean? Yes, technically, I could. In front of the faltering Clevius, Assistant Professor Claire blocked his escape with a carefree, wide smile. Then do it. Even as the familiar Assistant Professor Claire, it felt like no further argument would be tolerated. Clevius, perspiring anxiously, could not respond further. Magical abilities detail. Grade. Skilled magic student specialty. Elemental common magic. Quick casting level 10 mana detection level 10 fire elemental magic. Ignition level 16 wind elemental magic. Windblade level 15 intermediate magic can now be learned. Spiritual magic. Spirit empathy level 13 spirit understanding level 13 spirit manifestation level 4 shared senses level 3 spirit slot. Subordinate fire spirit muck empathy stage. 3 spirit summoning efficiency. Good unique enchantment skill. Grace of fire temporary immunity to flame surge explosion minor explosive magic. Fire magic ability enhanced spirit slot. Higher wind spirit Merelda empathy stage. 1 spirit summoning efficiency. Very poor unique enchantment skill. Protection of the storm periodic neutralization of damage rising air current intermediate wind magic. Wind magic ability enhanced spirit slot. Empty new spirit slot, empty. Looks like I should try bonding with a mid-tier spirit soon. The next day, Yenika, who seemingly recovered her spirits, arrived at the camp, her face glowing. Only yesterday, she had been listlessly wandering with a sullen face, but today, she was completely revived, sitting cheerily around the campfire. The difference in her demeanor was tremendous. Yenika, you seem to have gotten your energy back. Ed, you make it sound like I was completely down. Well, weren't you? Just the other day when you came to the camp. The other day. When was that? I forgot. Yenika raised her voice in a fluster, fanning her own face. Apparently, the memory of showing up at the camp with a deathly pale face, draped in blankets, was too embarrassing for her to bear. Back then, my response also felt emotionally charged. Seeing her shivering and hugging her knees, looking like a lost rodent, made it hard to leave her alone. Perhaps it's because Yenika is a character who steps out of the scenario. I feel my heart softens around her. After all, she's the only friend of my age whom I genuinely interact with. Is this level of social interaction enough for me? The thought inevitably crosses my mind. Maybe I need to widen my circle of acquaintances. In the end, the reason I'm surviving in this forest is to live a better and more comfortable life later on. While I might have achieved some degree of martial success, I'm still insignificant compared to the core members of the scenario, especially since everyone's growth skyrocketed from the third act. I had to actively keep up. Financially, I've always been struggling, and if my social circle is narrow as well, my journey still seems far from over. Above all, Sylvania Academy is an unparalleled environment to meet all sorts of nobility freely. It's a wasted opportunity I cannot afford to discard, even though I've not made the best first impressions and things haven't been going smoothly. Still, having Yenika is a boon. It's just some minor misunderstanding with a friend. Yes. Is that so? Yes, it's incredibly trivial and nothing to worry about, Ed. It's all been cleared up now, and we're good again. Smiling brightly, she indeed looked like the old Yenika, and I felt assured. Anyhow, Ed, I knew about your contract with Merylda, but it did seem odd. You still lack the skill to handle a high spirit. I had to resort to some tricks. Did Merylda not mention the ring? It was intriguing that the chatty spirit kept certain secrets well guarded. I was keen to keep the details about the Phoenix gold ring left by Professor Glass to myself, but I pondered whether sharing it with Yenika seemed reasonable. After all, she had been a great help with my training in spirit magic, and besides, the fact that I could contract with Merylda with this amount of magic power was unusual on so many levels that I couldn't hide it. Yenika wasn't likely to gossip, and as a trustworthy comrade, it shouldn't be an issue. So, I meticulously explained everything about the Phoenix gold ring left behind by Professor Glass. Yenika listened attentively, sitting neatly before nodding in understanding at the end. Then Ed, you are unable to use magic for now. It'll be difficult to contract with a mid-tier spirit right away. The magic will come back around the start of the semester after the break. A contract with a mid-tier spirit is needed. I knew this without Yenika having to tell me. If Muck is a rifle, then Merylda is a tank. The gap between the powers of a rifle and a tank is far too wide. Merylda is a high spirit that I've contracted with by force and is beyond my level of control. A single summoning drains my magical power completely, leaving me defenseless. I had to pour all my mana stones and ask for Lucis' help to barely manifest it. It's too strenuous to handle Merylda alone. She can be used as a trump card in dire situations but is not a spirit that can be casually summoned at will. Even Yenika, unrivaled in spirit magic, carefully manages her mana when handling high spirits, and that speaks volumes. Congratulations on being able to handle a high spirit, Ed. Among spirit masters, the day you make your first contract with a high spirit is called your second birthday. Not many spirit masters can even contract with high spirits in the first place. I can handle various mid-tier spirits well enough to be considered a veteran. I've indeed grown a step as a spirit master. You used a trick to do it, though. Hee hee. Her proud smile made me feel elated too, although I still have a long way to go before boasting. But Ed, as you know, high spirits can't be handled comfortably all the time, they're not a permanent asset. That's why contracting with a mid-tier spirit is essential. Low spirits are always on hand, mid-tier spirits are a trump card, and high spirits are the last resort. Most high spirit masters operate this way. So I need to have one or two mid-tier spirits that can be my core forces. Right. You are sensitive to wind and fire elements, but it's good to contract with other element spirits too. When your magic returns, let's try it. I'll help. Yinika, bouncing excitedly, seemed delighted to talk about my growth. It felt truly gratifying to have her support. To do that, I need my magic power back first. Once the semester starts, I'll be in your debt again. Sorry for always taking up your time, you must be busy. No need to apologize, Ed. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. And it's not time to worry about me, is it? The snowstorm is coming. It seems you're preparing, at least. Near the campfire, various hunting traps collected from around the forest were scattered about. Most were neatly organized and stored inside the cabins, but the ones needing maintenance were set aside. Neglecting to properly clean the teeth covered in blood or foreign matter can quickly deteriorate their condition. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, it looks like we won't be able to tidy them all up cleanly. The camp seemed to be preparing for winter as I looked around. Everything on the ground was securely tied and fastened with ropes. The cabins were reinforced with ropes and extra support was added with poles. The same went for the storage shed. The wooden shelter I first made upon entering this forest, which had become Lucis' nap spot, also had windbreaks set up, but whether they will stand strong remains to be seen. If it gets blown away, it can't be helped. Once this storm passes, spring will come, and a new semester will start. The environment in this forest will improve too, Yinika declared before her tone seemed to deflate. Slightly, speaking rather timidly. Maybe, it would have been better to move into Dex's hall. It's too harsh to have to spend this winter out here. Don't worry, I'll be in the Soul Library during the storm. That facility in the underground lab. Yes, I've made a separate entrance. Well, it formed naturally, rather than me making it. It may be a bit claustrophobic underground, but at least there are no drafts. Don't worry too much. It seems like a good refuge. Good to hear, but it might be boring. Locked up for a week. I'll dedicate myself to demonology training during that time. With all the materials and formulas secured, it might even be quite a tight schedule to get through them all. Ah, Ed, as always, you live your life diligently. You don't seem to waste any time. It's more accurate to say that I'm in an environment where I have to be diligent. And if we consider diligence, Yinika isn't exactly falling behind me. The envy and respect that come with being the top student in the grade are not to be taken lightly. Let's meet again after the snowstorm passes and the semester starts. We have to think about the joint combat practice, and there's the student council election too. Being the top student, you're bound to attract attention. Even if I didn't, people are already trying to feel out whom to support. There seem to be quite a few candidates. Honestly, I'm not sure about it all, so I'm trying to stay neutral. During the election season, Yinika, as top student, didn't really seek the limelight. By nature, rather than strongly endorsing someone, she respected all the candidates. By the way, Ed, your sister, she's running for student council president, isn't she? Yeah, that's right. She's got a bit of ambition, you could say. Suddenly remembering something, Yinika inhaled sharply and asked me slowly. Ed, do you get along well with your sister? Get along, should I say we do? To be precise, I don't know. Tanya Rothtaylor is a villainous stepping stone that appears and exits in Act 3. As a character who will soon be written out of the script, she doesn't require excessive caution, but for now, she still merits some level of attention. Still, she is the first kin I met in this harsh world. Considering I've been excommunicated, it's hard to speak out, but she's still family, after all. Whether I like it or not, there's a high chance I'll have to face her for a lifetime, so I really do want to get along with her. She doesn't seem to hold as much ill will against me as I thought. After all, siblings don't always get along, right? That might be, indeed, sibling squabbles are quite common, I guess. Yeah, whatever highs and lows we go through, deep down, I want to maintain a good relationship with her. Well, not to extreme extents, but I do care for her a lot. Even though I haven't done much for her, considering my rather limited social circle, the existence of kin has significant meaning to me. I want to start treating her well now to maintain a harmonious relationship. It's like finding a kinship connection alone in a barren desert-like world. As the Rothtaylor family will fall into decline by the end of the scenario, Tanya will likely end up in the same boat as me. But Tanya seems like the type of girl who will struggle to survive without much fuss, so oddly enough, that brings me some peace of mind. So, you care a lot for her, it was just a typical sibling fight after all. Suddenly gripping the sleeve of my coat, Yenika began to sweat profusely, turning pale. Ed, by the way, does Tanya like anything? Is there something she would enjoy as a gift? Maybe some kind of food. Quote. Yenika asked me this out of the blue while tugging at my clothes. I looked intently at Yenika and then spoke softly. What did you do to Tanya? Nothing at all. Yenika isn't one for lying convincingly due to her honest nature. It took her about 3 seconds, sweating profusely, before she confessed, though she made it sound much more serious than it was. Asterisk. The blizzard has been raging since dawn. Unless there's an urgent need, please refrain from going outside, and if you absolutely must attend to something, inform us through a maid. A maid from Ophelius Hall, her uniform crisply ironed, nodded quietly and left the room. The howling winter wind echoed eerily. Occasionally the windows shook, and snowflakes hit the glass, melting away in the warmth of the room. Ellipsis. Quietly lying on the excessively ornate, frilly bed, Clarice sighed deeply and sat in the private room of Ophelius Hall, looking into the dressing mirror. The tri-fold mirror was bigger than Clarice's frame, large enough to envelop Kylie's form entirely. She had let down her hair, and the brooch that maintained her illusory magic was put aside. The brown of her hair quickly faded, revealing the shimmering silver strands flowing down to her waist. Ellipsis. Clad in the protection of saintly magic, and capable of wielding powerful sacred magic, Clarice could fend off threats of violence. But survival through the harsh cold and potential danger. That was an entirely different matter. But the fear of her identity being discovered, that was more terrifying than any danger of the wilderness. A mishap here could merely result in getting lost within Akan Island. There were plenty of buildings and facilities to find shelter from the cold. All right. I can't just sit by. Clarice thrust open the window. Whoosh! The biting wind sliced across her pale cheeks, her silver hair fanned out with the gust. Click! She closed the window again. It was terrifying. Too terrifying. Ed was scary, darkness was scary, the cold was scary, being stranded was scary. Ellipsis. Regardless, the words of the romantic, Adele, began to float back into Clarice's mind, overcoming the fear of the unknown and always pursuing freedom. Ellipsis. Claire knew that Anise wasn't lying. Anise had confidently consulted her about testing Ed's mettle. I was never into that type of guy in the first place. Don't worry about it, Yenika. Anise, too, began to assert herself with a trembling voice out of nowhere. He looks like a troublemaker from the start, arrogant, always grumbling, and living off his supposed superiority. Why would I follow someone like that, huh? That's too harsh, Anise. You don't even know Ed well enough to say that. Well, what do you want me to do then? Anise retorted, then took a deep breath before slamming the table and standing up. I'm sorry for hitting on that guy without consulting you, sorry, Yenika. If you apologize so suddenly, I don't know what to do. Reacting this way makes it seem like Ed and I are, in that kind of relationship. Claire felt as if her soul was being drained. Was she really going to deny any relationship with Ed now? It seemed to Claire that Yenika had long crossed the point of mere friendship. Moreover, why did you do something I didn't ask for, Anise? Whether Ed is a good person or not, is for me to decide. Wait. Talking like this makes it seem again like Ed and I are in that kind of relationship. I didn't mean that. Yenika, you're too confused right now to think straight. Yenika continued to fret. Do you know how much I've been worrying? I couldn't even sleep at night. Anise is a precious friend, but should I feel betrayed like this? Am I even in a position to feel betrayed? I'm actually nothing, worrying over nothing. Don't worry, Yenika. To that man, you're quite special. Somewhere. Between friends and lovers for sure. From what I've observed, that's true. But saying that makes me unsure how to respond again. It's hot. Hot. Yenika, flushed to her limits, fanned her face while glancing back and forth between Anise and Claire. It wasn't the first time Yenika showed her bashfulness, but today was exceptionally intense. The directness of Anise's words was too much for the innately shy Yenika, making her wonder when the right time for progress was. Anyway, since you're saying it's a misunderstanding, then it must be a misunderstanding, right? Honestly, judging and evaluating Ed like that isn't right, but since it was intended for my sake, I can't be mad. Anyway, thanks for being honest, Anise. Yenika's clear declaration eased Claire's mind. It was unusual for Anise. Known for her flawless handling of tasks, it was surprising to see her causing discord with Yenika like this. But, it was resolved, so it was just a misunderstanding. Claire laughed at herself for thinking Anise might have genuinely fallen for Ed. Yeah, Yenika. But Claire caught the real expression on Anise's face. Looking down, subtly blushing, Anise's response to Yenika's words made Claire acutely aware of the chill running down her skin. Anise. After the tea party, Yenika hastened towards the northern forest. She had been focusing on spirit sensitivity training and, consumed by the misunderstanding with Anise, hadn't visited Ed much. Intending to see Ed regularly, Yenika's lighter spirit led her to the northern forest. Claire, unaware of Ed's whereabouts, saw it as just another training session. She waved goodbye. Once alone with Anise, Claire softly called her name. Claire, can we not delve into details? If that's what you want, but, Anise, still. I have my reasons. What reasons? As they crossed the living hall, Claire asked quietly, and Anise, swallowing dryly, grasped Claire's collar with a desperate look. Introduce me to a guy. Quote. It seemed familiar, but this time, the request felt more earnest. Unfortunately, Claire had no experience in love either. That's a bit too much to ask. Is it? People's feelings don't just change easily, Anise. No, Claire, you don't understand. Feelings and emotions can be overlaid. Anise, saying this, looked directly at Claire, trembling. Don't look at me with those eyes, Claire. What eyes? I was just looking. Anise took several deep breaths. I'm sorry for lying to Yenika, but I didn't want to burden her emotionally. I can deal with my own feelings. It's just that I don't have any new connections yet. Take your time to explain. You're excited, Anise. And finding new connections isn't that easy. Is that so? Anise, you're busy, and you don't invest enough in others to become that special. Wait, is this the right time to say this? No, you're right, your words make sense. Anise grabbed Claire's shoulders and shook them a couple of times. Claire, maybe the idea of having to date a man is just a societal expectation. Let's think more progressively. If it's about being special, Claire, will you go out with me? Please come to your senses, Anise. Think logically. You're usually calm. Just think it over, please. Right, Claire. I shouldn't be swayed by such things. Anise, steadying her spinning vision, spoke clearly to Claire. Distance leads to emotional distance. Once this blizzard passes and the vacation ends, and the scholarship students move to their new posts, I won't have to face that man again. We hardly share any academic interests besides elemental studies, so our classes will be different. I just need to get through until the scholarship duties end. Yeah, just until the scholarship students leave. The scholarship students will continue working with me as student assistants throughout the semester. The next morning, as the students gathered in the lab, Assistant Professor Claire, mimicking a trumpet, announced. Clevius and Yenika have been diligent, and especially Ed has been very proactive and skilled, so it seemed a shame to transfer him to another lab. Claire, looking utterly relaxed, bit into a tart. Since you'll be closer to student assistant status, there'll be more scholarships, and the atmosphere here is more comfortable than in other labs. Welcome everyone. Claire's lab indeed had a favorable working environment, with the professor lacking any sense of authority. As the students seemed to accept this, Anise, sitting alone at her desk, held her face in despair as if she had lost her country.